Thank you, David. Humble as usual, but give often, give generously, because it's a fabulous project and one that David carries on to this day without fuss and raises a heck of a lot of money. Rotarians and guests, now for the in-flight entertainment. Sometimes it's easy to overlook or indeed forget the role of our club members have played in our state's development. One important area is the arts. Respected member, the late John Morfitt, was key in designing the now focal point for the arts and indeed the whole Riverbank precinct. This on time and on budget and before the Opera House. Our Festival Centre is still regarded by many as a premier venue in Australia. His associate on that project, Lou Balsamo, was the recipient of a Rotary Club of Adelaide scholarship to study architecture overseas. Our guests today are well known and respected in their fields. Douglas has energised and grown the program and profile of the Festival Theatre during his tenure to date. Lee, a former group study participant to Philadelphia in the 70s, has turned his well-developed arm-twisting talents to promoting the interests in and dollars for restoring one of our other gems, Her Madge. To tell you more, please welcome our guest speakers today in our special 2 for 1 speakers offer.
Well, thank you, Peter, and thank you for the opportunity of talking about these 2 wonderful venues, which of course sit under the organisational helm of the Adelaide Festival Centre Trust. Many of you will know that. So this is really a great opportunity for me to be part of a double act with Lee Davis, which is always a pleasure. And he is the chairman of our foundation. And he'll be too modest to tell you this, but essentially, when we looked at Her Majesty's Theatre and what we needed to do with that for the next 50 years, what we needed to do, how much it would cost, and we were able to purchase the building next door, 62 Grote Street, which kicked all this into touch. We went to our foundation because it was getting a bit awkward in the first instance talking it through with government, and he headed up the foundation and he took on the challenge and said, we'll raise the money and we'll buy it. And it was the initial activity there that got it bought, and government alongside us in developing Her Majesty's Theatre, which he will talk about in a moment. So in a way, I suppose you could say this, what we're about to talk about, if you like, is the tale of 2 precincts in one city with 2 arts and entertainment centres, or 2 arts and entertainment venues right in the middle of them. So my job really is to talk about the Adelaide Festival Centre and what's going on over there. A lot of people have said, well, in the last 10 years, particularly with the upgrade of the Oval and what's happened with the Convention Centre and the bridge, that the centre is a sort of black tooth in the smile, because in many respects it was falling to bits. That's true on the outside, but the inside, as Peter noted, was extremely well built. It hasn't gone through the vicissitudes of the Opera House, where when they fired the architect, when they fired Utzon, they put a number of other architects into to deal with the venues inside, and I think they've regretted it ever since. The fact is, John Morfitt, very great architect, great man who we miss, but he worked with another gentleman, a guy called Peter Brown, who was the theatre consultant, and those theatres were extremely well built and they stand the test of time. But the fact is, at the end of the day, in terms of a modern precinct that we're trying to build here, in terms of aggregate of the entertainment district with sports, with conventions, and with arts and entertainment and public spaces, it certainly did need an upgrade and it needed a reorientation. So what are we going to do? You may have noticed that that we did about 3 years ago get a grant from the government of $70 million. We asked for a lot more than that. We wanted to upgrade the theatres inside, and we did get some money to upgrade the technical side, because I think when you looked at some of the equipment that we had over there, we had visitations from people all over the world who wanted to take a photo of it because it was museum stuff. And it was 40 years old. We still had people pulling the ropes up on the side and all that sort of business. We've got some of that, but essentially, because, as you know, the plaza area is going to be developed by Walker Corporation with a 5-storey car park, and all of that, I'm sure, will be great. It'll add critical mass and all the rest of it. But what it means, essentially, is the centre has to swing round and face the river. John Morford didn't design it that way, but and for good reason, because I think back in 1973 the river was a bit like the back of the fridge, but it's changed, and it was unsafe, it was poorly lit, but now that bridge has been a game changer. There's no question about it. The upgrade of this place, and so consequently people are using the river much more. So we wanted to capitalise on that. So essentially and I'll show you in a moment, we wanted to pick up one singular connector, one singular gesture from the King William Street all the way down, King William Street entrance up the front of the Festival Centre, all the way down to the footbridge at one level, because you will possibly remember in the past that access, such as it was along the front there, the north front, was like a tank trap. There were many different sorts of levels, different challenges thrown in the way of unsuspecting pedestrians. But now the idea is that promenade will connect, and it will have certain attractions on it, which I will get to in a moment. New entrances to the Festival Theatre. Necessity is the mother of invention, but they will push us round to embrace the north much more strongly. Our Walk of Fame, or Avenue of the Stars, a children's arts program, 3 new restaurants, upgraded foyers, and the technical side that I talked about. I just wanted to say that this place, last year attracted over 1 million people. We've worked very hard at that, but that shows you the pulling power of the place. Last year, Ernst & Young took a good look at us, and Ernst & Young now does this sort of thing for global cultural districts worldwide, along with other companies like Deloitte, etc. But we wanted a third party to take a real good look at the operations when we're in full swing. So that's $160 million of economic and social contribution that the Festival Centre and its activities contribute to the city. That's important. And it's also important in terms of reputation, because as Peter said, this was our nation's first capital city art centre. It opened 6 months before the Opera House. There was a certain set of ambitions there for the city, and they continue. I always feel like you start as you mean to continue, and that's what the people who designed and put this together all those years ago, and we don't want to forget it. It's an important component of what the city has to offer to its own community, but also to visitors as well. We take a very strong view about arts for all. Yeah, we do a lot of commercial work, but in terms of our audiences, multicultural, young people, year-round, international engagement, education, all of that, the festivals, they are very important to what we do. So this is the $90 million government reinvestment in the place, and you'll see here what we've tried to do is put that one beam of light from the bridge all the way down the front there, and you can see what the approach is there, and our intention is to make sure that people can use that boulevard, that avenue, and there are lots of things along it to attract people and to keep them there, from restaurants to activities to exhibitions, outdoor exhibitions, kids' playground, all of that. So if you look right up the front there, there is a massive digital display up the front, and some of the biggest screens I think we'll see in any performing arts centre anywhere. I'll come to that in a moment. 3 new restaurants, the Walk of Fame, interactive children's playground, more activity in the amphitheatre, plug and play, a lot of use of Elder Park, which is the best natural amphitheatre in the city, there is no doubt about that. So these screens have been put up the front. Essentially they're to hide a multitude of sins, or one big sin, and that is, well, it's not really a sin, but it's a fact we've got to wrestle with, and that is, if you look at the Hayek sculpture, those on the plaza currently, which is disintegrating, those funnels are essentially air intakes for the cooling system for the centre. So they're being moved out the front, but they are being covered by this very large bank of screens, which will be curated, there'll be moving images on it. We've got artists that we've commissioned from all over the world, as well as local artists, to work on this on the video arts side. So this will be really interesting. We've looked at a number of these similar sorts of fixtures in entertainment centres and art centres all over the world. And a Walk of Fame. This is really something which I suppose we take from the Avenue, the Stars and other things that are around the world. But here we just wanted to emphasise all the great people that have performed in this centre. There are people from Joan Sutherland, likes of Joan Sutherland, to Eric Clapton, to Jimmy Barnes, to George Solti and the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. The best, the very best, have performed at this centre over the years. So we went through a promotion with the advertiser to get people to vote for the lists. We had over 10,000 people vote through popular voting, and we've gone through all that, and we'll unveil that come Jan 1 this year. From the Australian point of view, these are the sorts of people who are on it, and the beauty of this is it is a live activity. So not only are the stars in the walkway, but every year people who are on it will perform in the centre again, and of course every year we'll pick another three. There'll also, for your phone, if you point your phone at the star in the pavement, there'll be an app which will pop up with all the background and so forth on each of the winners. So we expect that to have quite a lot of pulling power. If any of you have been out the back of the Darling Harbour fixtures in Sydney, you will know that there is a great playground area which is backed by a range of restaurants. And so that's a really good fixture for children and families. And we intend to do the same thing here, except we're going to have a music playground, because some of you will know that a couple of years ago we drove an initiative to get Adelaide designated as a UNESCO City of Music, and for very good reason, because this city has produced some great music and music events over many years. So we've looked at these music playgrounds in places like the Millennium Park in Chicago, in Denmark, elsewhere, in Japan. They're a great innovation. Kids will love them, and families will have the opportunity to sit in the revamped kiosk there or any of our other restaurants while the kids play. The foyers will be revamped, and you'll see much more video activity in those foyers, which will showcase all the great work that's happened there in the past, but also our performing arts collection, which is probably one of the best in the country. But most of the stuff that's in it, people just don't see because it's all catalogued and so forth. Occasionally we bring a few things out, but all of that will be digitised and it will be available on interactive screens for the future. That gives you a sense of that. You know, we're going to bring together the story of this place, from Ghana culture to our work over the last 45 years, and our performing arts collection, and all the work to do with UNESCO. And, well, this is just one of the restaurants, but currently we're working with an outbid approach to also to revamp the kiosk and the bistro, so that indeed there's a whole new set of dining experiences along that walkway. That's all from me, but I'm going to flick over to Lee to talk about the other precinct with the other theatre. But the intention here very strongly, and when we made the argument to the government for the $66 million loan that the Trust is taking to upgrade the Madge, was this notion of 2 leisure and entertainment precincts in our city, both with different kinds of flavours. One is the riverbank here, with all the things that it has to offer and all the investment that's going into it, and the other one is down at the Market Chinatown precinct. All those wonderful restaurants, people investing in the GPO, are going to turn it into Adelaide's QVB, the Market, and of course, most importantly, Her Majesty's Theatre, with the laneways that link the 2 precincts. So we think this is a really exciting time. And now I'll ask Lee to talk about Her Majesty's. Lee. Just bear with us while we... That's the best I can do.
Right, okay. There we are. Join Douglas in thanking the Rotary Club of Adelaide for this opportunity to talk about the Adelaide Festival Centre and Her Majesty's Theatre. I should just say something to conclude Douglas's remarks by saying that the Adelaide Festival Centre is really flying. For the first time last year, 1,060,000 people through the 3 spaces. And to tell you that although the Festival Theatre is closed now until the end of December, the Dunstan Playhouse, the space will remain open. But Douglas, in his time as the CEO and Artistic Director, has created arguably the biggest cultural link between Australia and Asia, the OzAsia Festival, which will be held in September and October. We now have the largest cabaret festival in the world, which is in June. We have the largest children's festival in Australia. It was called Come Out, but for reasons that you might guess, the name was changed to Dream Big. And then we also, because Douglas, well back into the last century, but not too far, was a guitarist of some note in a local band, he created only the 5th International Guitar Festival, which, like Dream Big, is held every 2 years. And Douglas, with his 25 years living in Asia, is now the chairman of the Association of Asia-Pacific Performing Arts Centres. That is the status and regard which people in the arts, performing arts, have for him. I asked Douglas only a month or 2 ago, when did he start thinking about Her Majesty's, the possibility of upgrading? Well, I think it went back to 2010, 2011. And we were conscious that the centenary of Her Majesty's was in 2013. We thought we'd try and get up an appeal to start then, but that was just too ambitious. Instead, we had a lovely concert hosted by Peter Goers, went live on ABC Radio, but that was the start of it. And then, as Douglas said, 62 Great Street became available, and we raised enough money to underwrite the purchase of that building for $2 million, and as Douglas has also mentioned, that convinced the state government to back it with a $32.2 million grant in the 2016 budget, state budget. So we were off to the races, and we have since then refined the project, appointed Cox Architecture as the architects to redevelop this historic building. But back to the start, opened in September 2013 with 2,170 seats. 2 men's toilets, 3 women's toilets. Would have been a tough go, I think, in those days. And the top level had 1,300 seats, which were only accessed from 5 stories of rickety wooden staircases on the western wall. That is now under a over a false ceiling, because in 1962 and in 1979 the capacity was slashed successively from 2,170 to just 950. And as you can see, that's what it looked like in 1913. A grand theatre. The facade remains untouched, largely, but the inside is no longer heritage. And the reason why we see Her Majesty's as such an important project is there have been so many shows that have bypassed Adelaide, and you can see them there. It's had a number of names. It was the Tivoli, and it's the last remaining theatre of the famous Tivoli circuit, still operating in Australia. It was the Tivoli for the first 7 years, and then it was the Prince of Wales for 10 years, and then it became the Tivoli again for 32 years, and then it was Her Majesty's for 15 years. And then it became the Opera Theatre for 11 years after a refurbishment. And since 1988, it is the Her Majesty's Theatre, and since that date, it has been owned and it's been operated and managed by the Adelaide Festival Centre. So the seats, as I said, reduced to 950. It means that all these shows bypass Adelaide. And so the project was to bring back the glory of the theatre, re-establish it to its former glory, and also make sure that we had the capacity to ensure that people didn't have to go as tourists interstate, but could stay at home and have the added advantage of perhaps bringing people into Adelaide. And just to be nostalgic for a moment, who of you knew that Sir Donald Bradman, who was a fine pianist, also wrote a song called Every Day is a Rainbow Day? And it was performed in Her Majesty's in a pantomime called Cinderella in 1931. Paul Kelly, the famous singer and songwriter, had a grandfather called Count Ercole Filippini, who was an Italian opera singer who performed on the stage, had a company here for a while. W.C. Fields, the famous comedian, came to Her Majesty's Theatre in 2014, but he was a juggler and magician at that time, before he became a famous silent and then later a motion picture star. Lauren Bacall, 1986, came here. Bit of a prima donna, Lauren Bacall, insisted on a Rolls Royce at the airport, but it was the wrong colour. They had to get another one. And she had to wear costume jewellery in Sweet Bird of Youth, the Tennessee Williams play, but she didn't wear costume jewellery. They had to go and get real jewellery, borrow it from distinguished jewellers around Adelaide, and then they paid a fortune to insure it. So lots of history, as you could imagine. So when the Festival Theatre closes, we're going to be busy in the next 5 months with lots of shows at Her Majesty's. And the plan is, when the Festival Theatre reopens at the beginning of next year, the Majesty's Theatre will close at the end of March, at the end of the Festival of Arts. So let's have a look at what the plan is. That is going to be the ground floor, with roughly 700 seats scheduled. Then you've got the first level, 400 seats roughly, with boxes attached. And then the top level, which is now under cover of a ceiling, there's going to be reopened. There won't be rickety staircases to get there anymore. In fact, there's going to be 2 lifts and a grand stairway. Lots of space and a bigger foyer, and you'll be pleased to know space between the rows about equal to the Festival Theatre, rather than the very cramped conditions that we have at the moment. So that gives you a side view. That's what it's going to look like with the 3 tiers. Roughly 1,472 seats. That's, as we near the final draft, it looks to be about that number. That's the side view. Again, from the front, from Great Street, you can see the stairways there. And importantly, you can see the addition on the left-hand side. That is 62 Great Street that we bought. At the moment, doesn't have that top level. And so we're going to be able to add a level and create more function space, more food and beverage space, gallery space. And the more that the foundation raises, the more elaborate the plan can be. So that just gives you a snapshot of it. And that was what it looked like when there were 2,170 people on September the 4th, 1913. And that is the plan now. I'm not sure, Douglas, if that is the final plan, but probably it gives you an idea. That's a concept plan. But you can see that they have tried to reflect very much what the original looked like. So there it is. And that's what it will look like in conclusion. So just finally, ladies and gentlemen, this is an exciting opportunity for Adelaide. We have ambassadors, in addition to Barry Humphreys, who is our patron. We've got ambassadors supporting this: Geoffrey Rush, Greta Bradman, Kate Sobrano, Todd McKenny, Peter Goers. So, in conclusion, I just want to say it's widely accepted by health professionals and psychologists that we get happier normally as we grow older, and spending on things you believe in that are worthwhile or that you love can increase that level of happiness. So you can see on your table some material that gives you some background, the early draft plans for Her Majesty's. So if philanthropy is on your bucket list, the grand old lady of Great Street would love some consideration. And if in fact you resist the opportunity to reinvigorate this historic theatre, I can't promise that you won't get a visit from the patron of the appeal, Barry Humphreys, as in his alter ego of Sir Les Patterson.
Thank you, Lee. Don't go. Rotarians and guests, we've got time for a couple of quick questions. Ralph Arthur might tell us about the occasion when Don played that tune. I think you were there, Ralph, weren't you? Anyway, a couple of quick questions. Do we have any in the audience? We've got a lot of arts people in the audience. Madam, microphone right beside you. Thank you for the question. Douglas is going to answer that one for you.
We have nothing to do with Parliament House, so I can't answer that directly. I guess the politicians are in charge of all that. But and indeed, there is a Centre for Democracy in the library. I don't know if you've seen it, with a great interactive wall. It's fantastic. If you haven't seen it, go down and take a look at it. So there is that Centre for Democracy in the library. I think the museum there at the Parliament House is still there, but I agree with you. I make the point that, and the point that you make too, is that there is a critical mass here. There's lots of different things added together which are attractive not only for local residents but visitors alike. And so Parliament House is very much part of that. It's a historical building, it's an important building, and it's a beautiful building inside. So I'm sure the powers that be will take that into account. If not, you should write them a letter.
I'm going to ask Chair's choice and ask a quick question. Dollars are always on the mind of taxpayers, of we taxpayers. I'm reminded that the Festival Centre opened before the Opera House, I think about $13 million. The Opera House was Australia's first $1 billion construction project. That really takes you back, doesn't it, in the 60s, 70s type currency. But so, what's the costing, in a quick answer to it? What are we looking for?
Yeah,
what's the ask?
Good question. Initially, as I mentioned, the state budget last year provided for $34.2 million, of which the foundation of $32.2 million, and foundation had to raise $3 million on top of that. After Cox Architects had looked at the project, and architects had looked at the project, it was realised there were some heritage issues, some problems with the roof, lots of other things that had to be addressed properly. And so that has been bumped up quite significantly, and the effective cost is going to be $66.2 million. The government's taken back the $34 million grant, given us a $61.5 million loan with no interest and no definite pay date. The larger theatre is going to enable us to generate income and pay off the principal without any interest. A much better deal than we had previously. Pretty excited about it. But the foundation is still committed to raising at least $3.5 million.
Thank you, Lee. Rotarians and guests, I'm about to present our guest speakers today with the Medici Jewel Light and Pen, which is the customary gift from us. It's for signing contracts and cheques, and in your part-time work as an usher at your two establishments, the light will come in handy. Would you please thank our guests, please. Thank you, Rotarians. Could you please put your seats in the upright position, replace your tray tables, and make welcome our Captain Adriano to close the meeting.